In today's episode of Hear Me Out, I sit down with Jenny talking about tinnitus tips, single-sided deafness, and more. Let's get to it. Hi, Jenny. Thank you so much for joining me on an episode of Hear Me Out. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much. I always like to start the conversation off with what your connection is to hearing loss.
Yeah, so I am single-sided deaf, and people sometimes get confused with that. What that means is I'm completely deaf on my right ear, and I have complete full hearing on my left. The reason why I have single-sided hearing is because I had an acoustic neuroma, which I was diagnosed with about a year and a half ago. Um, and I'll kind of tell you how I was diagnosed and go through the whole process. So, I am a physical therapist, and I was working one on one with my patients for this time period. And I noticed I was having to really turn my body to hear them. And I didn't really think about it that much, but I just really couldn't hear out of my right ear. And I was having this white noise sound constantly in my right ear as well. So I went home for Thanksgiving that year, and my cousin is actually a pediatrician, and I told her about it, and she told me you should probably go get that checked out. Well, I procrastinated a little bit longer, and that's when I finally went to the ENT, and he looked at my ear, noticed that the outside, like the outer ear, was fine. And he was like, oh, this isn't good. And so I panicked a little bit, but he said it could be three things. It could be a vascular type thing where the blood supply isn't getting to the nerve, or it could be where the like a virus attacks the vestibulocochlear nerve, and a lot of people lose it that way. Or and there's a 0.0001% chance that you'll have this, but it could be also an acoustic neuroma. And so after that, I kind of Googled acoustic neuroma. I mean, I knew what the word neuroma meant because of my medical background, but I didn't think too much of it. And he packed me on steroids that day, tried to get my hearing back, and it didn't come back in 7 days, because that's the for anybody that is losing their hearing, the 7 day time period, if a virus is attacking your nerve, that's a very important time frame to get your hearing back. So when it wasn't working, I was telling my dad, I don't think it's coming back. Well, then he ordered an MRI. And so that's how I found out I had an acoustic neuroma. He called me a week later, and he said, unfortunately, you have a brain tumor, and there's certain ways you can go about this. My hometown doesn't do very many of these surgeries, so I actually went out of town to shout out to MD Anderson. They really helped me, and a lot of people don't know that it's a cancer hospital, but they also do a lot of benign tumors, and an acoustic neuroma is a benign tumor. So they helped me get rid of this tumor, and I had a craniotomy flash like a year and a half ago, and they were unable to save my hearing, unfortunately, because the tumor had pressed so hard on the vestibulocochlear nerve. And really cool fact now is I only have one vestibular nerve, which means that that's your whole balance system. So I didn't have a lot of the balance issues that a lot of people have, so I'm really lucky. And that's I just think it's really cool that my body compensated for it. And I think playing a lot of tennis before really helped me too. So yeah, that's kind of where my whole background to it's been a whirlwind of a story, but yeah,
Oh my
it's been
goodness. It does sound like a roller coaster of like
yeah.
going through different appointments and then finding out what you have. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. And
Yeah.
so you just mentioned about a year ago you had surgery, a year and a half ago.
A year and a half ago.
So
And
how has that changed? Because you mentioned you didn't get your hearing back, but was there anything else that kind of improved for you?
yeah, so I would say about a month ago, I just felt back to normal. And
Wow.
that's crazy to me because I just kind of stopped thinking that, okay, I'm single sided deaf and it's not defining me anymore. And that's a big reason why I wanted to talk to you today, because getting this diagnosis can be extremely scary for people who are just diagnosed. You're realizing you're having somebody like basically do a craniotomy and have your head cut open, and um then you're having almost a 3 month recovery period. So I just want to help anybody who is newly diagnosed realize it is not that scary, and it'll get better. And people said that to me at the beginning too, and I didn't believe them, but I truly believe them now. But yes, so I was very overstimulated when I returned to work because there's music in the background, there's people talking. I work with a bunch of different people out in an open setting, so that has gotten better. And then I have cross hearing aids. So um, what those do, and I'll explain it a little bit for you, is my right ear does not pick up anything. It's just the transmitter on the hearing aid that will send everything over to my left ear. And they're just, if anyone was wondering, they're called Oticon. That's the brand. And I know some people that have Phonak. That's kind of the big US brands. And you're from Canada, right? Is that
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So do y'all have a little bit of different brands, or
Oh yeah,
yeah?
we have Phonak, Starkey, Oticon. We have all the big, like the big name
Oh,
brands.
okay, okay. I knew you would advertise like Starkey a lot on your Instagram, but um, so I use those when I have patients on both sides of me because I say what so much, and I'm sure you know how that goes. We say what a lot, but yeah. So it'll sometimes pick up, or it will make me realize somebody is on my right side, because with single-sided deafness, you get this shadow where you don't know anybody is over you.
Mm,
So
okay.
like you can hear people moving around when you have bilateral hearing, but when somebody just creeps up on you, it can be a little scary sometimes and catch you off guard. So those are some of the things that have changed. And I also would say getting back to working out was a really big thing after, because I was not allowed to lift or run. I love to run. So I wasn't allowed to lift anything or run for 3 months. And then when I started back and trying to go a little more heavy, I would just get this intense pressure on my head. So I think it was just my blood pressure or something trying to catch up, and I hadn't been doing it in a while. But yeah, those are some of the things that have improved.
That's amazing. Well, I'm really glad that, even though you didn't get your hearing back, there were other aspects of the surgery that were positive.
Right,
And I really appreciate you sharing about that because I mean, I'm bilateral, so I have no experience with the
right.
single-sided deafness, or the cross hearing aids. That's really neat to learn about. That's really,
Yes.
really cool. Very cool. And you mentioned before you had your surgery, you had like a white noise. So that would be, was that considered tinnitus, or was that kind of,
Yes,
yeah?
so it was tinnitus, and to this day, I still have it. It's
Okay.
all in my right ear. So I think this is just tinnitus isn't very well studied. I'm sure, I don't know. Do you have tinnitus right
I
now?
do. Yeah, I would call it mild. Like it's not all
Mhm.
the time, but there are points throughout the day where it'll get triggered and I'll have
Right.
moments of the ringing or the shushing sound. So,
Right.
yeah.
So, the I have it after, and my only thought process, because I've taken a lot of neuro classes and I've done neuro in my field. So I think what's happening is because my cochlear nerve isn't really connected to my brain. The outside of my ear is trying to like pick up the sounds and figure out what they're saying, but then they don't, you know how the electrical wire, if it's crushed, you can't, the signal can't really get through. So I think that's probably what it is, but there's ways I manage it, and I can share that with you too. Yeah, there, I mean, so what I do when this happens is, it happens a lot at work because there's a lot of people talking, and then I'm trying to like completely focus on the patient I'm talking to. My ear will go crazy, the right side. And sometimes what I'll do too is just turn my hearing aid down, because this ear isn't really needing the feedback from this side. And I just start thinking about something completely different. I just have to take a second and just say, okay, I'm not going to think about the tinnitus. So, like right now, since we're talking about it, it's coming on, which is funny to me. It's like such a brain thing, I think. So, I know that's hard to for
So
people to take that feedback, because it's, when I first heard about it, I would say to myself, okay, that's so silly. Like I just have to think about something else, but it really does work.
yeah, I find that too. Like I have to distract myself from it almost because as soon as I focus on it, it'll last longer, it'll get louder, and it kind of just like takes over. So yeah,
Right.
my favorite things are like baking, so I can smell something, like I trigger a different
Oh,
sense.
cool. Yes.
Or like
That's
I'll go outside and get like the fresh air or the
mhm.
breeze on my face, so it kind of distracts me. So
Right.
yeah,
Those are all
no.
really good things.
Yeah, it's funny how like you like as you go through with it, how different things like, oh, that actually worked today, or this is working better. So no, it's
Right.
good to hear other people's tips too, because you never know
Uh-huh.
what'll work.
Yeah, no, I'll have to start doing different sensors or something. But
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. And how do you find the tinnitus affects your day to day? Like, is it something that, I mean, I know you mentioned with your clients you have to distract yourself, but are there any times where it kind of it does kind of take over? And like, how do you handle those situations?
I would say yes. Because you can get, I think all of the hearing community or hard of hearing community could say, yeah, you could get really frustrated and irritable with it. And I take a break, is that's what I really have to do. Or even too, when the music's playing at work, direction of sound really gets me sometimes. And if the
Okay.
sound is directed at me, I have to just go flip it. And just so that nobody really gets mad that I'm flipping in the direction of it. I had to advocate for myself when I start jobs. I have to
Mhm.
say I'm hard of hearing out of my right. I'm completely deaf out of my right ear. If I switch the music around, I'm not trying to be mean or anything. It's just it's really hard to hear and it can be frustrating. And you know, one of your other podcasts talked about hearing fatigue, and that was a really big thing after my surgery. You're having so much input, or I am in one ear that at one point I would just fall asleep sitting up when I got home after surgery. So yeah, it was bad, but it's gotten better too.
Oh, that's good. And that's the whole thing with advocacy too, is it's so hard to get the confidence to say what you need, but like you're
Yeah,
not trying to be rude, you're not trying to be like pushy. It's just like I need this to be able to enjoy this situation better or this
right,
social setting better. And sometimes it benefits everyone too. So it's just one of those things that is so hard to say what you need, but as soon as you do it, it gets
right.
easier every time.
Right. And it was hard at the beginning to tell people that you're partially or that I'm partially deaf, but I realized I have to, or people will think that I'm ignoring them sometimes too. Because if you're on my right side, sometimes I'm not even going to hear what you're saying.
Fair
So,
enough. Yeah. That's the hard thing. Like you mentioned at the beginning, advocating for yourself and accepting your hearing loss. And I think that's the thing. Like it's not going to happen overnight. It might take a year, 2 years, but as soon as you can kind of let go of that social pressure and
right.
all those feelings, it gets so much easier. Like you said, like in the moment when you're going through the hard, it's hard to imagine getting out of that. But I
Mm-hmm.
mean, look at us now. You know,
I
we're accepting our hearing loss. We
know.
can
Right.
talk about it. We can help others, and it goes a long way.
Mm-hmm. Yes. It was very relieving and it just gets better with time. So
It
I
does.
hope,
And that's not to say bad days don't still happen. Of course they
right,
will, and they
right.
do. And you just know how to manage those better.
Exactly. And two, you have patience with yourself even more than you would have ever thought you would have had because people mumble a lot. I don't know if you've realized that because I'm a huge lip reader now. And when people mumble, I have to tell them I'm deaf too. And that's hard of hearing. I hate to say completely deaf. So um, that's hard to tell people too because you know some people will be saying, "Oh yeah, I'm deaf too," and I'm like, "No, you're not." I'm completely deaf in my right
Right.
ear.
Yeah. And it gets frustrating when you say it the first time and they don't get it and they keep mumbling and then you start to get frustrated. So it's like you say it a
Yeah,
little more forceful and then they're like, it's like, no, like
right.
you
And
are
then,
mumbling, you aren't speaking clearly,
right.
or they'll over enunciate and you're like, that's not
Oh,
what I meant.
yeah. Or sometimes
Oh,
that'll be the point where I actually tell my whole story too. And they are sometimes I will do that if it gets to a point where I'm comfortable with the person. So, but yeah.
and that's too, like whatever you're comfortable with in terms of advocating for yourself is all you can really try and do because the more you advocate for yourself, I believe it was Gail Hannon that said, like, you're also advocating for the whole community. So it doesn't even matter if you're, advocating to a big crowd, but if you're advocating to one person, you are ultimately helping the rest of
Right.
the hearing loss community. And it's hard, but it gets easier, like we said. And yeah, it's that's how we make change happen.
I know, right? Yeah. It's such a good
Yeah.
thing.
And how have you found navigating like different social settings? I know we've talked a little bit about getting people to communicate better and advocating, but are there social settings you tend to avoid, or how do you set yourself up for success in social
Yeah.
settings?
So right after my surgery, I didn't go out to eat a lot because acoustics in the restaurants are awful. I even try wearing the hearing aids in there. You just catch in a lot of background noises. So I like one-on-one conversations a little bit more than I've ever liked in my life. And after my surgery, I got to move somewhere really fun in Florida. So it's a touristy town, and there's a lot of restaurants here. So I go out to eat a lot, and when I do, they always say, "Oh, we can't. We have you had to have a reservation to be here." And so I say, "Well, do you have anything at the bar?" So you can eat at the bar too. And you just what I do is I place whoever I'm with on my left side and I can hear everything they're saying. I don't really care about what's on the right side of me. So I mean, it is great because then you get first come, first served to the bar whenever. And I think that's the coolest thing. And I would have never thought eating at the bar would be best, the best thing in the world. So, or what I do is I also ask if there's an outside spot because usually outside isn't catching the acoustics and the echoing of the walls in the restaurant. So that's how I really navigate it. And then I went to my first concert last weekend since surgery, and it was very loud, but I was so prepared. And there's a lot of Facebook groups for acoustic neuroma that you can find on the internet. And you see a lot of the loops earplugs. And
Yeah.
I didn't really believe in them at first. I used them a little bit after surgeries when the TV would be too loud when somebody else was watching TV or something. Because sometimes when you're overstimulated, the piercing noises can get you. But I wore that earplug the whole time. I could still hear the music and only had to have one, which is awesome. But um, yeah, it was a really great concert. And I mean, obviously, I had tinnitus the whole time, but I was able to ignore it eventually. And yeah, the loops earplugs are really good if you still want to hear back the noises in the background and stuff. So,
That's a really good tip. And I think that's also an important tip when it comes to hearing protection as well. Because like you said, it was so loud you could still hear it with the earplug. And that's a key point
yeah.
is protecting the hearing you do have left. And I also like that you mentioned preparedness because when
Mm-hmm.
you have hearing loss, you have hearing aids, you have all these like accessories, it is so important to set yourself up for success by being prepared. And
Right.
sometimes like early on, I would like rehearse how I would advocate for myself just so that it would roll off my tongue a little easier and I wouldn't feel as
Yeah.
anxious because I'd be like, what am I gonna say? Like if I need like something changed. And yeah, it's all about being prepared. Such a good tip.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And yeah, the being prepared part is the most important thing because I've been in bars too where the music is so loud and I don't have the earplug that I need. Or there is another place I went to go see the movie Twisters. And
Okay.
sometimes that movie can be, I was afraid that that movie would be, the tornadoes would be really loud or something, or they would turn on but it really wasn't bad. The only thing I missed about that is the subtitles because I turn those on at home all the time.
Yeah.
Netflix
If
is,
there's no subtitles, I'm not watching. Like it has to have, it's just one of those things that like I'll go to someone's house, but like if I go to my parents' house, I just turn the
Mhm.
captions on and I'll like when I
Yeah.
leave, I keep them on. Because I'm like, well, maybe that'll benefit them and next time I come, they'll be on.
Yeah,
One
because
of
there's
those little
parts
things.
we miss. So, I mean, and then you have to rewind it and figure out what it said again. Drives me
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
So,
I don't think I've been to a movie. I think maybe I've been to one or two since I've had my hearing loss. And it's just it's hard to enjoy when there's no captions or it's too loud and it's just like overwhelming and you're
uh-huh.
just like
Right.
just watching the
No,
images at this point.
that's what I was afraid of, that it was going to be piercing loud and I wouldn't be able to handle it. But
Oh
yeah,
my goodness.
you're not
And
wrong.
so if there were people that wanted to contact you or reach out to you to discuss more about your story because they're going through something similar, what's the best way to follow you or contact you?
Yeah. So I have an Instagram account, so that would probably be the best way. Just message me. Yeah.
Amazing. I'll make sure to include that below. That's so wonderful.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I'm just so grateful for you to come on and share your story. I always find it fascinating how different all of our stories are to hearing loss, yet we all have these overlaps of, different things that we all go through. So it feels less isolating to know that you're not the only one, and really appreciate you sharing your story.
Yes. Thank you so much, April. This was so much fun, and I hope that
Amazing.
there's more technology in the future for all of us because I really feel like we could benefit from it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much again for joining me.
Yeah. Thanks.